Hello, everybody. I'm Barbara Wilson, and I'm the founder and CEO of Working with Cancer. We're a UK-based social enterprise. We provide coaching support, training, and consultancy services to employers, employees with cancer, and working carers. And that's to help them manage working cancer at any stage post-diagnosis. Today, I'm speaking to my colleague Veronica Foote, working with Cancer's head of policy and consulting, about her experience as a patient, but more recently working as a carer for her husband, who's recovering from a rare form of lymphoma, which is one of the many blood cancers. First of all, I'd like to start with just a few statistics. The most recent 2021 census found that there are approximately 5.8 million unpaid carers in the UK. That's data from Carers UK. 10 years ago, Macmillan estimated there were 1.4 to 1.5 million people in the UK caring for someone with cancer, a number that must have increased significantly in recent years due to the fact we're an aging population and survival rates are improving. Being a carer for someone with cancer is arguably more difficult to cope with than having a cancer diagnosis. But so often carers are often ignored or just overlooked. So today's interview focuses on the role of carers for those with cancer, the issues they face in the workplace, and how employers can help. Veronica, hello.
Hello.
Would you start by introducing yourself and what you do here at Working with Cancer?
So thanks, Barbara. So as you said, I head up policy and consulting. But as we are a small organization, we get involved in the different elements of what we do in supporting organization. Under policy consulting, my prime area is to working with employers and helping them to develop the policies and the frameworks in which they can support their employees who are impacted by cancer, either as patients or as caregivers. And then also I work across with colleagues, with supporting in the training area, and I also coach as well. Following those three areas, so it's quite busy
Indeed,
in
quite busy.
those areas. And then prior to that, I mean, I bring with me. I've been working in the oncology space. Actually, I was doing some for probably more than 20 years. Prior to coming to oncology, I worked for a large pharmaceutical company, Novartis, where I worked in their oncology division. And so formerly, I was actually the head of HR for Europe. And then in the last 10 years of my tenure before moving to working with cancer, I headed up patient engagement, patient advocacy within the oncology space, both at Europe and a global level. And that basically meant helping to design clinical trials to making sure they were patient-centric, and looking at issues of access, the postcode lottery, etc., and many things for that. So, but there's one thing having a theoretical understanding, even though you have so much empathy, and then another thing actually being impacted and having cancer close to home. So, yeah.
Yeah. In the past, you've had to cope with your own health issues,
Yeah, yeah,
but then more recently, your husband's
yeah.
cancer diagnosis. Can you tell us about them?
Yeah, so whilst I was working at Novartis, I had a job. I was always traveling, and I started blacking out, and literally, on flights and restaurants and meetings in different countries. So I became a bit of a health tourist, and unfortunately, in one of these blackouts, when I was in Nuremberg in Germany, well, actually, one I'd actually had a CT scan and hadn't picked up anything, but another blackout, I had an MRI, and they picked out that I had two small brain tumors. And at the time, it was watch and wait, but cut a long story short, back in 2022, I needed to have radiotherapy because of the tumors, unfortunately, they're inoperable tumors because of the location. And I had to have radiotherapy. And having radiotherapy on your brain, the good news is that it stopped the tumors growing, which is the great news, because they were both in quite delicate areas. But the bad news is that the ongoing side effects of radiotherapy on the brain are lifelong. And that sort of brain fog, cognitive issues, and things like that. And then you throw on top of that maybe the menopause, and you think, well, what's the menopause?
On top,
Anyways,
yeah.
everything else. So it's made me though understand that. So I'm very cognizant. I have to write everything down. I have to, because brain fog is a constant thing. And I was just recovering off the back of that, and that was quite a hard treatment with all those steroids and everything. Everybody who's gone through radiotherapy knows how hard that can be. And then my husband then got diagnosed, I'd say luckily, caught just in time, with prostate cancer. And that was tough. But the good news is they caught it early enough. We went through that. So I was just going through my recovery, and he had that and supporting with that. Then we thought, okay, we're in the clear. And then 18 months ago, he became very ill very quickly. It took us 2 months to get a diagnosis. He was misdiagnosed, lots of appointments, hospital scans. And eventually he was then diagnosed with a rare form of lymphoma. And it's so rare that only 1 in 67 people in the country are ever diagnosed with it per year. So it's really, really complex. Fortunate we live close to the Royal Marsden here in Sutton. So, great care. But he then embarked on a journey of, like anyone, he was due to have 6 cycles of chemo and targeted therapy. And once he got over that and he was still fit and well enough, then he was due to have a stem cell transplant. But of course, like any treatment plan, nothing really goes as planned. And these were heavy. When you say this, behind every appointment, there's a lot of appointments, tests, scans, and everything. But we didn't have it wasn't an easy journey, unfortunately, and it wasn't a linear treatment journey. We had lots of surprises along the way.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. And focusing on being a carer for your husband Silvio, what were the main challenges that you faced and are still facing in managing your work and caring for him?
I think at the time when a person is diagnosed, especially a spouse or loved one and everything, obviously the focus is on them, rightly so. And then, but then the life stops, and you're expected to carry on with everything else. And also, because being a caregiver of someone with a complex condition is a full-time job, and you've got to do it on top of everything else. And then you've got the worry and concerns, about what's going to happen and the side effects and managing, and also putting on a brave face, because we have my husband has 3 sons, I've got a son, and family members. And you've also got to be that person who communicates. You've got to try and be that, be the sort of the PR consultant with the own family. And at the same time, you've got to work as well. And in the early days, where there were so many tests and scans, and you don't want to leave your husband by himself. You want to be there. So having to juggle appointments, and sometimes these things would happen at the last minute. So suddenly you're having to cancel things. And you feel like you're letting people down, to be honest with you. And so and then once you got into a rhythm and you knew when the chemo cycle was and when things were going okay and were stable, then you could plan things. But unfortunately, so my husband actually ended up having sepsis 3 times during his whole 18 months period. And the first time was particularly acute, and once you've been through it, then you build up experience. But the first time was horrific, to be honest with you. And we nearly lost him. And we spent 54 hours in A&E with him as well. And I won't go. That's a story for another day. But you are so focused on their health and well-being that your own health and well-being is completely forgotten about, both physically and mentally. And so. For that period of time, you're not eating, you're not sleeping, you're there constant, keeping an eye, you're so worried, and you become, because especially once my husband got into the ward or he was able to get admitted to the Marsden, he was fine. But 54 hours in A&E is a horrific experience, and so you become, I became his like A&E nurse, to making sure that he was getting the treatments he needed at the right time. And I'm not medically qualified, but I tell you, I became his strongest advocate, and that's what you need to do. But that takes energy, and all the energy reserves that you have for yourself. I would come back completely exhausted mentally and physically. And then you'd have to go again and go again and go again. And it was incessant.
Yeah, amazing how you managed to keep going. I remember, but amazing how you managed to deal with it as well as you did. But from your own experience, what were the kind of things that you found that either we at working with cancer or others outside working with cancer, what was you find the most helpful, and what was the least helpful, would you say?
So I think because being a caregiver, it's an invisible workload. It's not something as if you've broken your leg. I mean, it's like anybody with cancer, to be honest with you, because it's invisible for them. Most people can't see it unless once you have physical side effects, you've lost your hair or something. And so I would say that the dealing with the unpredictability, so I did say the most helpful, I think, certainly with working with cancer, and I was fortunate to be obviously in an environment of people who actually understand what I was going through. So that helped a lot. But I appreciate not everyone has that luxury. But I think the simple things about simple human understanding that I didn't have to over explain. When I said, I'm sorry, I need to cancel, I need to postpone, I didn't have to go into big dialogue about why or something, because sometimes you'd have to literally drop things at the last minute. And I remember sitting in, and then some things you could do because you'd bring your phone and reply to emails, and it was quite a nice distraction. But sometimes you'd literally have to drop off the earth and disappear. And I think having that flexibility without drama, that trust, when I called in or sent a message, and not only to yourself but also to clients, because I had things lined up with clients or with coachees, and I'd explain to all of them I was in the situation. So they understood, and they're very, very much sort of a family first sort of approach. And in some ways, especially with clients and coachees, because I was going through this is real life. And I actually remember saying to one client, I said, this is what it's like as a caregiver. I can't plan for it, I'd say the least helpful, and it's not a negative, but people have positive intent, is like these sort of platitudes, like, yeah, stay positive, be good. I'm like, oh, for God's sakes, you have and no idea. And I also think about people sort of minimize the uncertainty of everything, that they can't understand. Well, you have your chemo cycles, and because maybe they've lived with someone who's had chemo or something, and they said, oh, well, you do your 3 cycles every 3 weeks, and you have a bit of nausea on the first week and the second week. Everybody's experience is different. So you may have been a caregiver or yourself have gone through cancer and they thought, well, okay, this is how it's going to be from everyone else. But everybody's experience is unique, and you've got to appreciate that. And the other piece, and I know it's people are well-meaning by it, but it really used to grate me, this over-optimism. It's when you're in the dark of it, you want support, but you don't need people being cheerleaders, because you really don't know what's going to happen, and you have to be level-headed. So you don't want to be in the depths of depression, but you don't want to be naive enough to think this is a walk in the park. So you need level-headed support, not sort of this unauthentic over-optimism. Although people might think they're doing the right thing to support you, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think people always mean well, but it's that, as you say, and it happens obviously with people when they get cancer.
Yeah.
People say, "Oh, you'll be fine," and they can't possibly know you'll be fine.
Exactly.
But they feel it's important to be relentlessly positive and to kind of say it'll be okay when nobody knows that.
Yeah.
And I remember that happening to me. So yeah, it's not helpful in any situation to have that false.
I think there the empathy element comes in, because empathy is that balance between listening and understanding, giving some gentle support without being the cheerleader. And I think that's that nice balance is what's both if you're a patient or a caregiver.
Yeah. So looking back, I think you're sort of hoping you're out of the woods now.
Touching wood.
Thank God. Yes, I'm touching wood on my desk here as well, Veronica. But looking back as far as you can at this stage, is there anything you think you might have done differently?
Yeah, in some ways, I'm my own worst enemy. I think I should have asked for support and help earlier. And so, for example, and I have to say, so my husband has two older sons from previous marriage, and they were great. They live in Milan, and my husband's Italian, and they did come over quite a lot, actually. I have to say, much more. You know, they were concerned, um, and they were, you know, they're both young lads in their 30s, very capable and everything, and maybe when they did come over, to spend weekend and time with him, you know, those moments, either when they was in hospital, you know, making sure he was visiting, or I should have taken some respite time for myself and delegated that to them. They were more than capable. But I was afraid to, because just what if something happens and I'm not around, you know, and with hindsight, even if I'd just gone to like a little country house hotel in, you know, in Surrey, just to give myself a bit of a spa weekend break or something, you know, I would have been close enough if anything happened to quickly come back. And I never did that, and I should have done, because there was support there for me. And I think taking that respite. I also think trying to keep up the facade of everything is normal is often, I think we all do, whether you're even a patient or a caregiver, because you feel like you're strong, you've got the world on your back. And I think accepting that life isn't normal, and it's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of reality. And I think maybe that's something I would have done differently. And the other one, I think, is, well, two other points I would say, is about protecting my own energy, which is what linked to my first point, is I didn't take care to recharge myself. I didn't give myself an opportunity to recharge or take care of my own health or well-being, which I'm probably suffering the consequences now. And so very much now my husband's, you know, on the up and up, is to do that. And I think finally setting boundaries, because it was interesting. You know, husband's got some really great family and friends and things, and obviously people wanted to come and visit and stay, and especially if they're coming from overseas. And there were moments when things were going, I was like, I want to say, no, you can't come and stay. And in some cases, say, look, if you come, you're not staying at home, you're going to stay in a hotel, because I cannot afford to host you and be the hostess with the mostess and take care of this and do that, you know. And so I think having the courage to set clear boundaries is also important too.
All such important points, Veronica. You know, I think, you know, we try in our coaching for carers to make sure those points get across, you know, self-care, setting boundaries, you know, preserving your own energy, you know, looking after yourself, and saying no when you need to say no. And I think the other thing is kind of being human. You know, we're often afraid to admit that we're having a really tough time.
Yeah, absolutely. And my people who know me my sort of USP is, you know, Veronica, very strong, reliable. You know, if you got any issues, everybody would come to me with their problems. I've always been seen as a problem solver, you know, carrying the weight of the world and being very strong and resilient. But sometimes it's like, okay, you know, but I've had enough.
We're just people, you know.
Yeah, you know.
So look, so what if you were giving some advice to others in difficult situation of being a carer? I actually think being a carer is more challenging sometimes than having the illness, in a way, because you have less control, you know, in a way. There's nothing you can do apart from try and be as supportive as you can. But you know, what advice would you pass on to others in sort of similar circumstances, do you think?
So the first one is don't be afraid to advocate. And this is really actually for the person that you're taking care of, but speak up. I'm fortunate because I've worked within oncology. I have an understanding of how a healthcare system works. So I had, let's say, the information. I wasn't afraid to challenge my husband's treatment plans or what was going on or how he's being treated, you know, and not challenge, but ask questions and chase up when things, you know, weren't maybe going as well they should. Don't be intimidated by healthcare, because as a carer, your prime responsibility is supporting your loved one. And I think all too often people are intimidated by the consultants or the other Absolutely not. You've got to. It's your responsibility to
Mm.
advocate on behalf of that, and be well informed. And there's lots of information out there to help support that. I think as a caregiver, though, sort of bringing back into our conversation, is to speak up and tell your employer as soon as possible. Tell them, don't be quiet about it. Let them know what's going on, because they're going to see changes in your behaviour and in your performance, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And if they don't know why suddenly you're missing appointments, you're dropping the ball, work has been sent in late, past deadlines, or whatever, and you've been a really good employee, whatever your work environment is. If you don't tell them, then they're not going to understand the circumstances, and then things become even more difficult because they presume lots of other things. So, and then when you do tell them, you've got to be specific about what you need, whether it's maybe you need to be able to work from home for some periods, or you need great big flexibility, or you need to be able to suddenly drop out, and when you take on commitment, say, look, yeah, I think I can attend that, but be aware I might have to drop out at the last minute.
Mm.
Or having getting a deputy, someone who, as a buddy or a colleague, who can pick up, and that you share work together. So I think, I know sometimes it's difficult in the workplace, but if you speak up early, it helps to prevent issues, rather than having to deal with them later.
Mm.
I think about accepting help. Asking for help and accepting it are two different things, because the other thing is, and I'll smile here, is we all have our own way of doing things, and if someone's going to step in and come and help you, and they do something for you on your behalf, and it's not quite the way you would have done it, don't complain. Don't, accept it. It's the 80-20 rule. It might not be exactly how you would have done it, but it's good enough.
Yeah.
And so I think accepting, I think all of us, I think, Barbara, it's hard sometimes to think, okay, I'll do it, but that's the right thing to do, and letting go. And then I'd say to my last points, and is for me, in which I didn't really do this, but I'm saying this now with hindsight, is taking care of your own health, and going for your checkups, making time appointments. Don't reschedule them, because, and I say this, and I cancel appointments, I cancel checkups. I didn't, if I had symptoms, I didn't go for things. So I'm being a hypocrite here, but I'm potentially paying the consequences now. But the old adage, when you go on an aeroplane and they say put your mask on first before you put on the child, that is so true. And then I would say it's okay not to be okay. You're not infallible. You're not Superwoman, or Superman, or whatever. So there would be my sort of key thoughts that I would say to other carers, and the learnings I've had from this experience.
That's brilliant. We'll make sure some of these points are kind of written up when we publish the video. What advice would you give employers, and by big ones and small ones? What do they need to do?
I think all the work that we do within working with cancer, one of the big things is about the company culture, and whether it's safe to speak up. Yeah. And so, for example, like I said earlier, if you're become, your husband or partner or someone is newly diagnosed, and you're their primary caregiver, and the advice is to tell your manager. In some organizations, people don't feel safe doing that.
No.
So I think the first thing is for an organization, you have to create a safe space, a culture where people can disclose things and don't feel that their job is at risk, or they're going to be penalized or something. So that's the first thing. Not an easy thing to do, and it takes years, but I'd say that was the first thing. I think the second one is to offer real flexibility, not let it just be something that you put on policies, but in reality, we say we do offer workplace flexibility, but in essence, it's sort of frowned upon, and because then people are afraid to ask for it. So I think offer real flexibility. I know it goes without saying, but I think managers need to be trained. Line managers need to understand, and it doesn't have to be just about cancer, but understand it, because Because as you said earlier, I mean, there are so many unpaid carers in this country, not just with cancer, but across all illnesses and diseases and things that they have to help. And I think a lot of line managers have no idea what it means to be a carer, whether if it's something for a relative short-term condition, or if you're dealing with somebody who has long-term health conditions. So I think line manager training and awareness of the caregiver load would help. And in that is the understanding that, and if you're a carer and you're having these conversations, your performance is going to fluctuate. So a manager needs to understand that there will be fluctuations in performance, because you're not going to be on the ball, because it's like you've got a second job, unfortunately unpaid. And also understanding that the workload or your caregiver responsibilities are very unpredictable, out of your hand. The hospital calls and your loved one has to do a PET scan. They got an opening this afternoon at 2:00. It's 10:00 in the morning. Can you be here for 2:00?
Yeah.
And the answer is yes. And you have to drop everything. And so at work, in a working environment, you're saying, "What do you mean you're disappearing?" So I'm sorry, I've got to go. I've got to take my loved one to hospital or whatever. And I think the other thing is that you're not looking for special treatment. Because I think this is where, in the British culture as well, sort of the guilt about letting people down or whatever. You're not looking for special treatment. You're just looking for understanding. So I think employers need to understand that you're being an empathetic employer, not treating people as favourites.
Yeah, I think that it's managing uncertainty is so difficult, but it's important that you kind of put employers on notice that there are periods of uncertainty, and it's tough for everybody, the carer in particular, but the employer has to understand that you're not planning on just disappearing at a moment's notice. It's what you have to do occasionally. Things have to slip, and if they have to bring in cover occasionally to help out, then that's what they need to do.
And one of the biggest risks, and especially with my husband's condition, but across is the risk of infection, and because the immune system is compromised, and like my husband, he had 3 bouts of sepsis, and sepsis is a life-threatening condition, and it changes so quickly, and I think it's one of those things that if you don't understand that you need to act very quickly and promptly as a caregiver and be aware of the signs and advocate that, it's one of those things. It adds the unpredictability of the disease, because infection control is probably one of the biggest things that you need to be aware of. And actually linked to that is also infection control. Is that you may need to work from home, especially when things are acute, because you don't want to travel on the train and go into work, because you want to try and keep your home environment as germ-free as possible. And we had a situation where we wouldn't allow younger members or people who go to school, and even my son was at university at one point, he had to come home and he used to have to wear masks, and we had like the COVID protocols.
So like COVID.
Yeah, because and so you have to restrict this. And so if you're a regular commuter, and the expectation that you'd have to go into the office, that especially when things are acute, you're not going to be able to do that. So that working from home, not just for workplace flexibility, because you're trying to reduce infection and minimize those as well.
But I think all of this is just reinforcing the fact to keep in really close touch with your employer, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So they know exactly what's happening and what you can or can't do. And looking kind of more broadly from a kind of national perspective, are there any changes you'd like to see here in the UK in terms of legislation or guidance to improve the life of people who are working, who are carers, Veronica?
So we currently, the recent legislation, there's now carers are entitled to 1 week unpaid leave a year, which is, well, it only happened recently. It's better than nothing, but unpaid leave is not enough. You need to have paid leave. I would say, and because if you think about it on a macro basis, the carers are unpaid carers are cost are saving the economy billions of pounds a year,
Yeah.
billions and billions. And so there needs to be a way, whether through taxation or incentives or so, there has to be a mechanism to that if you are a carer, that there is some way of being able to cover the costs and so you're not having to take unpaid leave. A lot of good organisations will give you that, but it's not statutory, and I think there needs to be statutory guidance. I think there needs to be better employee guidance on that, and so the of the burden. We're talking here about cancer, but my sister is caring for my brother-in-law who he had a critical stroke, and he's got lots of care issues, and she's basically not able to work anymore. But if you were to pay for her role, it would cost thousands, because he's not in a home, she's taking care of them at home. I mean, and there are thousands of people at home who are caregivers, and I think they are unsung heroes of our society. So I think there needs to be much more awareness of carers and the carers' rights.
Do you think there should be a kind of carers policy within organisations, Veronica?
Absolutely, and I think the work that we do within working with cancer, when we're working with organisations, we raise awareness not only of those who are being diagnosed with cancer, but also there's an element to protect carers within that, and I think policies need to reflect that, but not just the policies, it needs to be standard practice, and obviously not just in the area of cancer, but across anybody who has significant caring responsibilities.
Okay, so finally, coming to the end of this conversation, Veronica, is there anything else you'd like to add, or you'd like to kind of add that you feel is relevant and important for those listening to this conversation?
So I think just leading on from a policy perspective, I'd say that we have to understand that carers are the hidden workforce behind every diagnosis. If an employer was to do a survey of how many people have caregiver responsibilities, I think they would be shocked by how many people have them, and they hide it. But as carers, I think if you support the carer, you're supporting the patient. Because the primary carer is that person giving that primary support. So in some ways, it's although there's obviously, rightly so, a lot of focus on the patient, but if you focus also on the carer too, you're helping the patient. And so that's that. And that carers aren't invisible, which is sometimes, it's in this conversation, you've sort of brushed aside, and advocate for yourself. I mean, even in the hospital setting, I've had many discussions on this subject. So speak up. You have responsibilities as well, and you need to be acknowledged for that. And then finally, and I think this is the key takeaway, is that your own well-being, both mentally and physically, is critical. So don't cancel that gym membership. Don't cancel those things. I made some of those mistakes, and I'm in the process of rectifying them at the moment. But you got to take care of yourself.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Veronica, for sharing your story with us today. I know it's been a really tough time, and just want to say how much I appreciate all the stuff you've managed to do for us during a very, very difficult 12 to 18 months. And it's, we've all got our fingers and toes crossed that everything continues to progress so well for you and Sylvia. But I really appreciate your sharing your story with us, because I'm sure I know it's not easy to do that, but I'm hoping that people find it useful to hear what you've been through, and to take courage and encouragement from what you've learned from it all. So just wanted to wind up this interview. It's been recorded by, as I mentioned, Working with Cancer. If anyone listening to this would like to find out more about the work we do, about our training services, about our policy and consulting services, which Veronica leads, or about our coaching, do please get in touch with us, either at our website or contact us, and I'll just put up some details now. So either contact us at the website, which is workingwithcancer.co.uk, or via admin@workingwithcancer.co.uk, or call us on 07910 835 585. Thank you so much for listening today, and hope you found a lot got a lot out of this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.